Hi, everyone. In the interest of people's time, I am going to start. And those that can't join right away, this webinar will be available after tonight's session. It will be recorded and available to watch later on. So just trying to respect everyone's time so that we can ensure to get through all the materials within the hour that we have scheduled. So thank you so much. Welcome to all of you who are joining tonight. My name is Matt Curry, and I'm the Manager of Student Awards and Financial Aid at NSCC. And I'm very excited to be the host for tonight's webinar for eCampus Money Matters. Just a couple little things to note as we get started. So if you have questions throughout the webinar, I would encourage you to ask them as we go along. You can ask them out loud by unmuting your mic, or you can use the chat feature within the webinar system. My only caveat with that is that I may not have the ability to respond via chat. I will address the questions out loud to everyone, if that's okay. This session, as I mentioned, it will be recorded and it'll be made available on our Get Started website. So it's nscc.ca/get started for those who join later who really want the information but weren't able to participate in the session tonight. I would ask that you please mute your mic when you're not asking a question. So just look for the little microphone button and press that to make sure that we don't get any of your background noise. So I'm just going to check if Trisha, are you on the call tonight? Trisha Donovan? No, okay, so Trisha might not be here yet. She's the principal of the eCampus, and she is going to say a few words if she is able to join. I'll introduce her later in the session to say hello to you. Before we get into the webinar itself and the details of the webinar, are there any questions off the top about how this webinar will work or topics that you hope that we'll cover? Okay, if you do have any questions, just ask out loud or ask in the chat on the screen. So you would have seen a description of the webinar when you signed up, but just to remind you, I want to go through some of the topics that we'll cover in tonight's session. So really the goals of this webinar are to help you understand the financial supports that NSCC has available to you as an eCampus student. Then we'll go into everyone's favorite topic of budgeting. And specifically, we will talk about, I'll provide you with some methods to track and reduce your expenses. I'll offer some tips to develop a realistic personal or family budget that you can use throughout the school year and your academic career at NSCC. And I'll also highlight financial planning as a means to achieve your goals. And finally, I'll talk about some helpful resources for the year ahead and even beyond the year ahead to use as you get more familiar and acquainted with budgeting. Money matters is something that we all have knowledge about. So I would definitely encourage anyone that has any tips or things that have worked well for them in the past to definitely share those. We're all learning together in this topic, so definitely encourage you to participate and share any tips that you might have. All right, so I'm hoping that by now you would have heard about at least our Student Awards program that we have at NSCC. Our student awards are growing all the time, and the amount of funds and awards that we have. Um, we're very fortunate that it continues to be more and more robust from year to year. We have had lots of success with a campaign called Make Way that our NSCC Foundation led for us over the past couple of years. And they've raised lots of funds to support our Student Awards program. So um, some of you may have applied for awards this spring, which is great, and some of you may have even received some. Um, we will be launching another round of student awards for our fall term, and that will open on September 12th, and the application period will run until October 15th, so just after the Thanksgiving long weekend. Within that awards program or offering, there will be several awards that are specific to you as eCampus students. So I would definitely encourage you to check out the awards eligibility criteria in detail, and definitely take special note of the awards that are geared specifically to you as an eCampus student. That being said, we have lots and lots of student awards that have really broad criteria, and they're open to all students, regardless of what campus you're attending and what program that you're enrolled in. So while there are certainly some specific ones that you'll see for eCampus students, there are lots of awards that are open to all NSCC students to apply for. The estimated value of fall awards is about 350,000. So we'll be giving out about 300 awards this fall. Awards that are selected, our awards for fall will all be selected by the end of November, and the credits will be posted to students' accounts in time for the January tuition deadline for winter term. So I encourage every one of you to check out the awards when they go live. You'll get an email with the announcement to go in and check out the awards you're eligible for and complete an application. You can apply for every award that you're eligible for with one application. We have a system that kind of models online shopping. So if you're familiar with how to shop online, then you're in luck because that skill transfers over nicely to our student awards program. You add awards that you're eligible for to a shopping cart, and then at the end you apply for all of the awards with one application, which is really great. I also wanted to highlight a program that you may or may not be familiar with, but at NSCC we have an urgent aid program. So this program is available while classes are in to provide financial assistance to help with like more urgent financial situations that might put you at risk of withdrawing from NSCC. So these can be things that, in life there are emergencies that come up that are unforeseen, car issues, job loss, things like that, where if you're finding yourself in a difficult situation, this will be a program that you might want to explore. So the eligibility is pretty broad. Students must be enrolled in a program that leads to an NSCC credential or an apprenticeship program, full or part-time, or adult learning program. So specifically for the process to apply, a little bit different for eCampus students, just where you're not on campus as much as someone that's studying on campus. So the first step would be to set up a meeting with your student services advisor. If you aren't aware, you as a student will be assigned a student services advisor, and that will be the person that you'll reach out to start the conversation about urgent aid. At that point, your student services advisor will meet with you, and you will complete a budget with them to have a look at how much unmet financial need you have. And from there, they will either recommend or not recommend you for urgent aid and get approval from their manager, which there's several criteria that are used to determine that. Then within a few days, you would receive the aid and or next steps. So some of the outcomes or one of the outcomes for that program might be that you find out about other financial supports that might be available to you that you might need to or might want to consider applying for. So that is one example of another outcome that you could come across with that program. So before I get into budgeting, does anyone have any questions of financial aid that I just highlighted that are available through NSCC specifically?
Thầy của mình á đi học bởi vì đại học ở đây nó khác với ở bên mình là vậy á. Thì lúc trước giờ cũng nói trong rồi á.
Hi there. Sorry, did you have a question? All right, so here I will move on to the topic of budgeting. So when it comes to budgeting, using these definitions, a roof over my head is a need. So is clothing, food, tools for work, and medications. So really, one of the most important things to understand when making a budget is the difference between needs versus wants. So as the slide said, a need is considered a necessity, something that's required, something that's essential for life, whereas a want is a desire or something that's wished for, something non-essential. But of course, one person's want may be another person's need. So what I mean by that is that for Sam, who lives near a bus route, a car may be a luxury. While for Samantha, who doesn't have access to public transit and can't cycle to work, a car might be a necessity. A car may be a necessity. As well, needs and wants may change over time. So a full-size washer and dryer may be a need while you're raising a family, but apartment-size models may be what you need when your children are grown and you have downsized to a smaller home. Can any of you provide an example for each, a need versus a want?
I think even sometimes a need and a want can overlap. Like you may need a stove to cook on, but you don't need the top model, right? You want the top model, but you only need the base model. So the need and the want.
Yes, absolutely. Really good example. And so often when you compare yourself to other people and you see that others, your neighbor might have, the top of the line gas stainless steel oven, that might trick you into thinking that that is a need for you when really, you know, it could be a want. And when you go into a furniture store, sometimes you need to be careful with salespeople of creating that need for you. That's a want as well. Really good example. Anybody else have any other examples of a need versus a want? I guess the key thing here really is that it's important to differentiate between needs and wants and to balance them in your life. So really it's key to set spending priorities so you'll have money for the things that you really need and a plan to save for the things that you really want. I would encourage any of you to check out the activity that's linked on the screen here. It's a really good fun kind of way to that illustrates the differences between needs and wants. Spending decisions. So what influences your spending? Some questions to consider might be, or which statement is most like you? So are you someone that when you see something you want, you buy it? Or do you shop with a goal in mind, but you may buy something else too? Or do you shop with a plan and you resist buying things on an impulse? Another question to consider, if people you know have a new popular item, do you buy it too? So what I just mentioned there about keeping up with your neighbor that has the top of the line oven, do you feel like you need to have that same oven? Another question, so when you make a big purchase, do you just go with your gut? Do you compare prices at one or two stores? Or do you do some research and compare prices at even more than two stores? So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that most of us think we make spending decisions based on rational factors like need, price, and budget, and we do, but we're also influenced by a lot of other factors such as advertising, impulses, and what our family and friends buy. Many factors influence how you spend, including your emotions, habits, and peer pressure. So it's interesting to watch how these different factors can affect your spending decisions so you can be aware of them and better able to exert some control over them as you encounter those expenses. So needs versus wants is a very important key role in budgeting. And then if you can take away, or if you're not familiar with these terms, if you can take away these two terms at the end of this webinar, then you'll be ahead of the game already. So sometimes it may seem as if expenses keep piling up endlessly, but you can control many of your expenses. It takes awareness, planning, and a little self-control. Most of us can find at least a few items to cut out or reduce without much sacrifice. The payout is a more secure future, fewer worries, and the money for the things that you really need and want. So fixed expenses are the costs that don't change from period to period. So, or month to month, or very little. They're also due consistently, and generally they need to be paid to avoid broader financial and life consequences. So that might include things like eviction for not paying your rent or mortgage, interest, fines, fees, etc. Can anyone give an example of what a fixed cost might be that you have? Think about those constant fees that you have each month that are paid regularly. And
My mortgage, my power,
yeah,
my cell phone.
yeah, great ones.
got the rent for the condo.
Yeah, really good.
Insurances, maybe.
Yeah. Those are all really good examples. Variable costs are a little bit different. They can be defined in many ways, but a general rule is to consider anything that you buy in a store and or the spending you control as variable costs. So that might be groceries, gas. So basically you determine how much you spend and when, and this area is where you can prioritize your spending on variable expenses. Can anyone give any example of other variable expenses? So these would be expenses that change from month to month.
Like you're eating out or Tim Hortons or whatever. Like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
entertainment, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, groceries.
Yeah. Sports and recreation might be one. Clothing. So lots of different examples there. So what I'm trying to get at is that why is it important to look at your costs with these two categories? Well, because not knowing your balance can lead to significant financial challenges. So by spending too much on the variable costs that are within our control, we can leave too little money to cover the costs that remain consistent each month. For example, spending a lot of money on entertainment without planning for fixed costs may make it difficult to pay rent or cover utility bills at the end of the month. So there's often larger long-term financial implications for not covering your fixed costs when they're due. It's also important to note that some variable costs, i.e. groceries, are critical spending areas while others aren't. So that should also impact how you balance your finances. All right, so the famous question, where does your money go? This is a really good strategy to try. I know it might seem like an easy question, trying to figure out where your money goes, but it's often the most complicated and time-consuming first step of starting a budget. So what I would encourage anyone to do is to get a better idea of where your spending is going, to start keeping receipts and record the expenses that you encounter. You can do that by saving receipts, reviewing your bank and credit card statements. You can also make a list of irregular expenses, things like gifts, donations, taxes, car or home repairs, things that come up but aren't always budgeted for from month to month. And then total your expenses at the end of the month. If you do that for about a 3-month period, it's going to give you a really good snapshot on what your expenses look like. For a general sense, we do have a budget form on our website. I'll share the link with you at the end of this session, where you can start to document some of your expenses to get a better picture of where your money's going. Unnecessary spending. So we definitely all have expenses that we can't eliminate or cut back on very much. Things like food, clothing, housing, transportations, and childcare are just some examples. But there are many other expenses that are a matter of choice, and they can definitely add up. So there's nothing wrong with spending money on extras if you can afford it. But if you have trouble paying your bills or finding enough money to save for the future, you might need to reduce your spending until you get your finances back on track. So the first thing is, going back to the very beginning of our webinar, is to look at what your needs and wants are and start cutting from there. So again, take a look at your spending. What is fixed? What's variable? What is a need and what is a want? And are there things that you can do differently to economize? So some small examples that are on the slide here. Things like bringing lunch instead of eating out is an easy way to save some funds, or to curb unnecessary spending. Taking transit instead of driving, if that's an option for you, depending on where you live and if you're on a bus route. Um, Using a reusable water bottle instead of buying bottled water. Making your own coffee instead of buying coffee. One other really good one that people don't think of right away, but is definitely important, is to consider negotiating better phone and cable and internet rate plans with your providers. Um, it really pays off to shop around and look for the best deals that are out there and really look at what your needs and wants are when it comes to those things. So, do you need as much data as what you're paying for? Do you need all the channels on your television, or do you need cable at all when there's other streaming services that are available that are lower in cost? So things like that can add up pretty quickly and can make a big difference on the amount of money that you save each month. Anybody have any other examples of some ways to economize that have helped you in the past? All right, well, this is also an important point. So just as it's important to reduce unnecessary spending, it's also really crucial that we don't deprive ourselves of everything, because that's just not realistic. So putting aside a small amount of money every week for treats. Your treat might be a spa treatment, it could be a weekend getaway or a special item that you've had your eye on. If you save for these things, you can spend without guilt, and then you'll be less likely to splurge recklessly later on. So reduce unnecessary spending by avoiding impulse buying, making easy lifestyle changes, and making your money go further with the products and services that you buy. So some tips that you'll see on the screen there: set aside the money that you can afford each week for miscellaneous spending. And when it's gone, wait until next week before spending more. Going shopping with a list and sticking to that list. That's always a challenging one, but really important. Leaving credit cards at home and paying by cash or debit so you don't spend money that you don't have. Reducing the credit limit on your credit card to avoid that temptation, really crucial. Another strategy that I'm not always the best at, but works for definitely a skill that I'm trying to improve, is to sleep on it and not impulse buy. And if you still want it the next day or you're thinking about it and you look at your budget and you have room for it, go back and get it at a later time so that you can ensure that you're thinking that you've thought about it and that you can afford it. So most of us do have a general sense of how much money we have coming in, but have you ever added it up and written it down? By doing this, it can give a clearer picture on where we stand. There is a budget calculator on the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada website that's linked in this presentation, or you can Google it. And I would definitely take a few minutes to do that. It's a really good, informative calculator that can help you really identify all your sources of income. So everyone needs some type of income, whether that income comes from a student loan, a line of credit, or investments. You need to know how to keep track of your income and manage to cover your expenses and save for future goals. So just a couple tips to share with you that I've come across and that students have shared with me in the past. One is to consider forming a money support group with friends or family. Often money is one of those topics that people don't talk a lot about, but we all have um, strategies that we use on a daily basis, that if we started to share that more with each other and be more comfortable talking about money, we'd all benefit in the process. So in addition, you could also look at getting discounts through group buying, and you can help each other stay on track in reaching your financial goals. Another tip is that if you're using a government loan or a line of credit to pay for your education, you could look at prepaying for some of your most essential items, things like your rent and mortgage. So you could talk to your landlord and see if you could pay your rent in advance for a few months, your heat, your electricity. And you can do that at the beginning of each term so that you can ensure that your basics are covered throughout the term, so that if it reduces those temptations of overspending from areas that you shouldn't be spending from. Really good strategy there. So when we think about budgeting, some people they get scared or overwhelmed, but there's really nothing difficult about a budget, about having a budget, nor does having a budget mean that you have to sacrifice or do without the things that you want. Really, at the end of the day, a budget is just simply a comparison of your income to your expenses, and it's organized. It's an organized way to manage your money. After so now that you know where your money's coming from and where it is going, you're ready to put a budget into practice. There are lots and lots and lots. If you were to Google tools that are out there to help you with your budgeting exercise, you'd find lots. I do have a couple on the screen there that I wanted to highlight that are really good that I've used myself. But certainly there are tons and tons out there, and there's lots of free apps, smartphones to help you with that as well. So after you make your budget, so after you document all of your expenses and your income, you'll want to consider, is the difference between your total monthly income and total monthly expenses a positive or a negative number? If it's a positive, then that means that you actually have a surplus. Most people I know wouldn't fall into this category, especially if you're in school, but if you are, congratulations. Here are some ideas that you can do with the extra funds. You could look at paying down any debt that you have. When it comes to debt repayment, you always want to start with the highest interest debt first, things like a credit card debt. You may want to boost your emergency fund, so that rainy day fund, if something happens that was unforeseen in your budget. You may want to increase your monthly savings amount. Or you could invest some of the surplus, so RESPs for your children's education, RRSPs for your retirement, tax-free savings account. Those are just some examples. So a surplus is awesome, but I think that a lot of us who are studying would find that you may have a deficit, which is totally okay. If you have a deficit, it just means that you need to relook at things and make some changes so you can balance your budget and get back on track. So some things you can do is, again, going back to those variable expenses, take a look at your variable spending and brainstorm some ways that you might be able to cut back. You can also, as I mentioned, reduce expenses by doing things like negotiating better plans for your communications and maybe for your banking. Contact your service providers to see if you can get better rates. And then, of course, another option is to increase your income. Not always an easy thing to do, but maybe there's a part-time job if you have time. I know that a lot of NSCC programs are pretty demanding, but if you were to speak with your instructor and get a better sense on just how much time you might have to play with during the week, you might be able to find some extra time to work part-time. Applying for a student loan, if you haven't done that already, if you're in a program that is eligible for student loan. Applying for student awards. lots of scholarships and bursaries that we have at NSCC, or seeking out government assistance from other programs that are out there. So budgeting, whether you use a budget or envelopes, your budgeting system definitely isn't a one-time thing. So to make it work, you really need to review it regularly. At first, I would recommend doing it weekly, going in and updating your numbers, taking a look at where you're at. Once you're certain that it's accurate, you can scale that back to maybe monthly. And then check to make sure that your income and expense figures are still realistic. If your actual spending is a lot different from what you're estimated, you may need to adjust your figures. So before the end of the webinar, I just wanted to highlight financial goal setting. So if you want to go on a road trip, you need a good map. So it's the same when it comes to your finances. To manage your money well, you need to know where you want to go. So that means setting some financial goals. So you're more likely to reach your goals if they're SMART. Have any of you heard of the SMART formula before?
Yes, I do.
Yeah? Great.
Yeah.
So there is, you'll be getting a student handbook, or actually it's available online for eCampus students on Connect. Once you start at NSCC, you'll get a link to our intranet, and with on there you'll be able to search for the student handbook. And this is one of the exercises that you'll find in your student handbook. So you're much more likely to reach your goals if they're SMART. So SMART actually stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-framed. So one example when it comes to setting a financial goal that would follow the SMART formula is, well, if you were just to save for a vacation, that's pretty vague and it's hard to measure. So how will you know if you're making progress? On the other hand, if you save 5,000 for a trip to New York within 8 months, that's a SMART goal because it's specific. You know exactly what you're saving for. It's measurable. You know how much you'll need. It's achievable and realistic, so you can break the total needed into smaller steps. So for example, saving 625 a month sounds much easier to do. And it's time framed. You set a deadline. So when you define your financial goals, make sure that you use the SMART formula. So short-term goals. It's important to understand the difference between the types of goals. So what do you want to do in the next year that will cost money? Whereas a medium-term goal, what do you want to do in the next 1 to 3 years? Or a long-term goal, what do you want to do in the next 3+ years? So if you take a look at your budget and you add the monthly savings to your budget, you can enter it under savings, or you can add a special category for that goal, such as New York trip. When you add that amount to your monthly expenses, if you still have a surplus, you're in great shape. If you already have enough money to save for the current goal, you can allocate your monthly savings amount to another goal. But don't forget to save money for that emergency fund or a rainy day fund for unplanned expenses. Remember to put money aside each month for your financial goal, and little by little, you will get there. So we're coming to the end of the webinar. We've gone through a lot of different topics, so I don't want to completely overwhelm you. We've talked about income, expenses, budgets, and financial supports available at NSCC. You can definitely put that into learning into action by using some of the resources that are available for free. So I've highlighted some of them on the screen here for you. One key website is, there's an acronym here for it, it's called FCAC, but it's Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. I would definitely encourage you to visit that website and go through the wealth of information and resources that are there to help you. Lots of really good strategies and tools if you want to dig into this a bit further. There's also lots of activities and initiatives that will happen throughout the year at NSCC. You'll quickly find that we're really passionate about this topic and helping students uncover money management skills that can help them help you throughout your academic journey with us and beyond as you go into the workforce. Your student services advisor is an excellent resource as well to help you with budgeting and to help you with finding funding sources in the community should you need them to assist in your education. So that brings me to the end. I'll leave it open for questions. Again, feel free to ask out loud, or you can use the question feature and ask me, or you can ask away in the chat, and I'll be happy to address all of your questions. I hope that you learned something in tonight's webinar, and I hope that you'll employ some of the strategies that we talked about to help you better prepare for the year ahead and beyond with your budgeting skills.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.